Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host, and what does it really mean to look deep inside, and how do we stop the behavior of sin, and so much more? Talking all about that on The Next Right Thing with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blai. Good morning, Debbie and Adam.
Well, good morning, Keith. That's a lot to cover in less than 30 minutes, but we'll give it our best shot. Good morning, Adam. Happy Monday to you. And yeah, we're talking about, the title of the show is Your Conscience Clear? And we're talking about going deep inside and really getting rid of those things we're attached to that cause us to sin. And Adam, let's make sure that when we discuss this back and forth, that we bring in the very strong act of contrition, the prayer that we say, where we are really vowing to God that we're gonna sin no more, and we're gonna avoid the near occasion of sin. So pick it up there, Adam, and let's really discuss this, because I think this is what so many of us struggle with, and it's really worthy of our time to really look at this and cover it from all angles if we can in less than 30 minutes, plus open the phone lines. If you have something to say about this, please dial in 877-757-9424.
Okay, Deb. And I just want to say really briefly, I was really inspired by the Eucharistic Congress and watching different parts of the event. If anybody missed it, go find it online. It is extremely inspirational. The whole thing, it was just wonderful, very edifying. So here we are. We're looking again at the examination of conscience and the idea of sin, and I want to come back to what we so often come back to, the kind of three stages in the Christian spiritual life, which is the purgative way, which just means stop doing bad, the illuminative way, which is essentially start doing good, charitable and loving things, and then the unitive way, which is when God touches us and gives us a foretaste of heaven. We can't make that happen, but the first two we are basically in charge of. Now, we need God's grace to do it, but we're in charge of cooperating with that grace. So here we are with the examination of conscience, which really is part of the purgative way. It's the attempt of the soul to stop sinning and offending God. Now, and if people want to go deeper on this later, remember this is primarily coming from the Carmelite saints. You can look into John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, and Therese of Lisieux, names that a lot of people have heard. So when we do the examination of conscience, and those that haven't done that, it's essentially kind of, a list of looking at the ways the Ten Commandments play out in life today and in terms of sin. Sometimes we read a commandment, it can seem a little kind of general and vague, and I'm not sure, well, what does that really mean in my life? And so the examination of conscience gives us concrete examples of how those commandments unpack into our lives today. So, Deb, the big part here is that it shouldn't just be a rinse and repeat with confession. It shouldn't be like, well, I know I keep falling to this sin, but I can go to confession and everything will be fine. And, maybe some year down the road I'll do better with this. But, I've got confession and I can just keep going. Remember, for absolution, we need a firm amendment to stop doing the sin. Well, what does that kind of mean? The Carmelites explain this to us about the purgative way. It's not just stop doing the behavior, but it's about rooting out the source of the sin. Where in my mind, in my emotions, in my history, and my memories, where is it that this sin is kind of bubbling up from? There's usually some, formative experiences with that sin that, we go back to, replay those memories, If you think of eating, a juicy apple, and you think about that, you're inclined to go find another apple to eat. And we know from Thomas Aquinas, this is exactly how the devil tempts us. Thomas spells it out. He activates a memory that we have. We play a movie that's on the shelf in our mind, and then he excites the passions. He tries to get the passions of the body going. And that's how he defines temptation. So finding the root of the sin, where it's bubbling up from, really is going back to those places that can be replayed in our mind and kind of get us going to where the passions get excited, the rational mind kind of shuts down a little bit, and we just kind of lust after that sin, and we stop thinking and we just go do it. And that's kind of the process that the Carmelites are trying to help us with. And so what I'm getting to is, remember, it's not just stopping the behavior, but the examination of conscience should help us find, where in my life is this bubbling up? And that comes to what you said, Deb, which is the near occasion of sin. And maybe you could unpack what does that mean?
Right. And it's interesting what you're saying, because, when you identify that you have these inclinations or weaknesses or things that are causing you to commit a sin or get very close to committing a sin, or even if you've crossed over that line, it is important to go back to why that attachment is there, and really work on something to, I believe anyway, Adam, working with a lot of people in life coaching and with people who have scrupulosity, to replace that urge, if you will, that desire, if you will, replace it with something that is productive, that is equally going to grab your attention, and replace it with something that is pleasing to God. What do you say to that? Because I think sometimes, we can all sit there and say, okay, I've got this problem, I've got that problem, this is where I fall into a near occasion of sin, close to sin, or I actually do commit some kind of venial or maybe even a mortal sin. Okay, we can do that part. I think that's rather easy. But when it comes time when we're facing that, Adam, if we don't have something in place that we go to just, force that situation not to happen, that struggle is real, and that struggle is very hard sometimes to overcome. What do you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. So, here we can draw a little bit from cognitive psychology. So, when I was in training in graduate school in psychology, we learned about cognitive psychology, and that's really about looking at the thoughts and how thoughts can kind of gain momentum to the point where we lose control of them. It's kind of like the scientific version of this Carmelite model. And so, for instance, if I say, don't think of a purple elephant, the first thing that pops into your mind's eye is a purple elephant. And if I say, okay, now really try hard to not think of a purple elephant and give you a few seconds, you're going to think about exactly that. Now, and so what you said is right on. It's not that we should sit there and grit our teeth and say, I'm going to fight this, and, I'm thinking about that, but I'm going to fight it. It's just going to get stronger. That's the first tip. The second tip that we get from psychology is that you've got to nip it in the bud fast. So we know from cognitive psychology, if I start having a thought that has really taken me down before, maybe in terms of getting depressed or, getting worked up or upset or something like that, if I don't nip it in the bud quickly, it gains momentum in my mind and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the two things are, you have to have something ready to pull off the shelf really quickly, like it's an instinct, it's a habit, it's easy to do, something there to pull off the shelf that you can do to reorient the mind. So instead of don't think of a purple elephant, I say pink flamingo. And suddenly the purple elephant is gone and my mind is locked on something new. So that's the big tip, is resisting thoughts doesn't work. You've got to change the thought, derail that completely, switch to something else, and that's what's going to actually give you some control over things again. You're going to be exercising your rational mind.
Okay, I love that. But and tell me your thoughts for all of us that are listening. I was always a firm believer, especially when I learned this in religious education with the younger, with the youth and the adolescent age, and then the teens. What do you think about, this boredom? Somehow when kids are bored, like let's go to kids. When kids are bored, they're going to fill it with something, right? And so those gadgets that are in their hands, with the games that they play and all sorts of stuff, that becomes very entertaining, and they can get lost in it for hours. My dad was a firm believer of this, and I saw this in religious education as I grew older. My dad was a firm believer to get kids outside and to do something physically, go tend to the garden, cut the grass, play sports, go kick the can down the street, whatever. But don't just sit there alone with your boredom. Go out there and do something physically. Is there something, is there a basis to that?
Yeah, for sure. So a bit of this depends on the personality of the person, but in general, yes, I would say all of us, when you're wrestling with, my mind is starting to spin on this particular thought, and I'm trying to, think about something else, it's really helpful what you just said. Instead of just thinking about something else, I'm going to do something else. So now I've engaged my whole cognitive and bodily system. I'm not just in my mind picturing the pink flamingo to stop thinking about the purple elephant, but I'm going to stand up and I'm going to grab some paper and now I'm going to draw a pink flamingo. So now my body, my visual system, my motor system, I'm engaging everything. So let's take the spiritual version of this. The two really good ones that I have found is having a quick mental prayer that it's on the shelf in your mind. You don't have to think at all. It's really easy, and it's short. And so as the memory starts to bubble up, and the thought of, oh, maybe I'll go to that website again, or maybe I'll do this thing that I keep falling to be able to pull that off the shelf and start saying that prayer, not in a really upset, anxious way, just in a calm way, redirect the mind to that prayer and start doing something. And then the more physical version, for me at least, is keep the rosary in your pocket. Pull the rosary out. You're physically interacting with it. Mm-hmm. You're doing something, and you're praying. I found that to be the most powerful.
I agree. And I would add, get up and walk while you're praying. There's a reason for that. But we can talk more about this on the other side of the break. We got to send it back to Keith. He's got some announcements for us, so we'll hold it right there. Back to you, Keith.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And yeah, there's so many good pointers there and suggestions for us not just sitting idle with boredom. And interesting, Amy, who's streaming from YouTube, mentioned she learned to not tell her mom that she was bored. She would hand her a broom. I'm sure your entire house was clean at one moment in time, but yeah, I'm certain that would also stop saying that I would be bored. And that's just one of the great things about streaming on, say, YouTube or Facebook, is that we can interact with you. So if maybe you're used to listening to the radio, that's perfect. Maybe you're driving, and that's completely understandable. But if you'd like to interact with us, almost be like in a studio audience, yeah, you can certainly join us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Just search Morning Joy Radio or GRN Online. It's a great way to stay in tune with us. But yes, we are continuing the conversation. We're curious to know, how do you resist those thoughts of temptation? Give us a call, 877-757-9424. We're taking calls on The Next Right Thing with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blai right here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host, and we are continuing the conversation of trying to resist some of those thoughts that maybe pop in, the temptations, and so much more with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blai. Take it away.
Thanks, Keith. We appreciate it. Adam, there's so much to cover on this, but on the break, I was trying to look up as quick as I could where I found this a long time ago. We use it in life coaching. This idea of movement to change your thought patterns. Like, let's say you have a physical limitation. You can't, get up and walk while you're praying the rosary. You can I've read it where they've even said that, like, if you're sitting down and you even just raise your hands and do some upper body movement to just move the body, it changes the way you're sitting and thinking about things. It's very interesting, and I learned a lot about it. I'm trying to find where it came from, but maybe we could talk a little bit about it, because I think sometimes, Adam, especially for us as Christians, we get very much jumbled. We get lost in our minds, and it gets jumbled up because we don't want to sin, right? We don't want to hurt God. But when you're alone with your thoughts can be very, very powerful, and they can really take you down. And so if you add that with boredom setting in, typically boredom is filled with something that is not typically not pleasing to God. Like you think of mindless eating, you're just going to the refrigerator 100 times because you're bored. We used to hear that when we were kids, right? Our parents would say, "What, are you bored? Close the refrigerator." Okay, things like that. So what do you say to all of that? Because I think there is a process to this and a practice that we can start utilizing today that can really help us shift our thoughts.
Yeah. So I think that's great, Deb. I think it's right on. We see when you look across spiritual traditions in the world, different religions even, you see this a lot. The idea of walking while praying or walking while meditating is actually a fairly common thing because it's just human. It's part of how our bodies and nervous systems work. I think getting up and walking is great. Doing something physical is great. Personally, that's how I pray the rosary. So unless I'm actively have to do something, I will pace or walk. So if somebody texts and says they needed prayer in between sessions during the week, one of our cases, and they're having, a crisis or a hard time, I'll take a walk at the seminary where I work and just do a loop and pray a decade of the rosary at this particular loop that I make. And if it's a real serious situation, I'll do 3 loops and I'll finish, depending on my timing, I'll finish a whole rosary, and it's wonderful. I think it does 2 things for wrestling with sin, right? So not only are you switching your mind to prayer and doing something, but you're getting what's in your field of vision to change. You're stimulating the mind. You're walking, the environment's moving past you. You're not sitting and staring at the near occasion of sin, which might be, for instance, the phone. You're not just sitting there trying to resist it while having it right there at your fingertips. You're getting up, you're stimulating your mind with new things to glance at. You're checking the ground as you're taking your steps. You're engaging yourself. And then the prayer somehow, there's something magical to it. I'm sure it's biological, of course, but it feels magical. The prayer just flows along with the movement of the walking. It's really, really helpful. So I think it does 2 things. It disengages us from the environment that we're wrestling with,
right?
But it does something wonderful to the thoughts. It just gets the mind going.
Absolutely. And here's the other situation that we encounter when we are feeling that boredom sets in or something, and like you said, the phone is right there probably within reach or in our hand already, or you can go on the internet and just, mindlessly go on and just, forget about things for a while. When you get outside of yourself, and I totally agree with going to prayer first, but let's say you're in a social situation or you're in a work situation. When you get outside of yourself and you immediately go to service of others to help someone else, that also changes the way you think about things. It does give you that feeling that you feel like you've done something productive. It's satisfying, very similar to eating a nice meal or something of that nature. When you're in service to others, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on some wonderful stuff. So I have a good priest friend who is a hermit, not the rock and roll hermit that maybe we're going to hear about later in the show, but a hermit that's unknown to the world. And, as I've checked in with them about prayer, one of the things I found myself doing as I'm moving about the city, if I have to be downtown, is instead of just praying, each person that crosses my vision, I pray for that person. So it becomes a charitable act. In my mind, I'm saying, Lord, please have mercy on them. Lord, please have mercy on them. And I'm interceding for each person that maybe comes across my field of view. And what that does is it gets me out of my own head and leads me to praying for others. And I think you're exactly right, Deb. Somehow that kind of shakes you back to your senses and gets you kind of oriented to other people as opposed to kind of getting in the quicksand of thinking about yourself. and then thinking about the things you're wrestling with, etc. It's really beautiful.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if my dad knew this when we were growing up, but he was really good at redirecting us when we were kids. If we even shared the slightest bit of boredom that like the day was just moving too slowly. I mean, it was back in the day where he would say, go to the neighbor's house and see if you can mow their grass. Go get the mail for your neighbor. Go do this, and it's like we don't have that anymore, Adam. And it's very unfortunate. If you look at the neighborhoods now, typically everybody's the garage door goes down. Everybody's in their homes. Nobody knows what anyone else is doing. Everybody's stuck in the home, right? And there's not that outside. Well, I know because of safety and other things. But that's unfortunate because if we lose that type of option, where we can go and do something else, I think that's why the phones and the computers have become such a friend to us. I say we get back out there into the world. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the last generation before the internet got big. There was only bulletin boards when I was a young teen, and we still went out and did things. And I'm not being the old guy who's like, oh, in my day it was better.
Right.
But there is a real value. Our bodies are designed to move and do things, and it's really helpful. I wanted to just give people some place they can go if they want to go really deep on what we're talking about.
Okay.
So there was a desert father named Evagrius Pontus, long time ago, Evagrius Pontus. You can look for the book. It's real simple. It's called Talking Back. And what it is a collection of scriptures that he had memorized that are tailor-made to each temptation that would arise in his mind. So he would fight each temptation with a different scripture. This is taken from Jesus' temptation in the desert, where he quotes scripture in response to each of the devil's temptations. But it's much more elaborate, and it gives you tools. So you can pick your biggest weaknesses and maybe memorize that scripture from the book. And that's just another way to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, we tried to cover a lot, Keith, in this short amount of time, but I think this was very helpful. I know it was helpful to me. If it was helpful to you, please share this with a friend. That's what we believe is a good use of social media. Adam, have a beautiful Monday. God willing, we will be back tomorrow. Any final quick comments, Adam?
No, just again, everybody, go check out the Eucharistic Congress. Watch some of the videos of it. It's super inspirational.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so for today, we're going to catch the rest of Morning Joy with Keith.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And I'm glad you brought up the Eucharistic Congress. There was a moment, I think it was filmed, it was during adoration, and it was over 50,000 people packed in that stadium, and it was completely silent. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. It was incredible. Yes, recommend checking out all things about the Eucharistic Congress on social media. Speaking of social media, though, have you ever wondered why icons are so special? Icons are windows into the invisible world. And if you missed it, I'm talking about the spirit world, this last Saturday's spirit world, where they talked, Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blai talked about the power of icons with Father Thomas Loya, pastor of Annunciation Byzantine Catholic Church in Illinois. I highly recommend checking it out. I personally was doing yard work while listening to it, and if you're interested in icons, highly recommend checking that out. Just search the spirit world. But coming up next, we're talking about the examination of conscience. What is the background of it? Why should we do this as Catholics? Maybe not even Catholics. We're going to talk all about that coming up right here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.